I married a rich man for financial security, life stability, and safety. But I learned too late. The most dangerous thing in the world is not poverty. It's loving the one person you were never supposed to love. This is my story. People think marrying a rich man fixes everything. It doesn't. It just hides your pain behind expensive walls. I was 29 years old when I became the second wife of Richard Hale. 57, powerful, respected, cold in a way that never showed on his face, but always showed in his eyes. The wedding was perfect. White roses, crystal chandeliers, guests dressed in smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Everyone said I was lucky. No one asked if I was happy. When Richard slipped the ring onto my finger, his hand was steady, experienced. This wasn't his first promise. It wasn't even his most important one. He leaned in and whispered, "We'll be good for each other." Not "I love you," not "I chose you," just good, like a business arrangement. And maybe that's all it was. I smiled for the cameras anyway, because survival teaches you how to smile. The Hale Mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place where emotions weren't allowed to breathe. The ceilings were too high, the halls too quiet, the air too still. That first morning after the wedding, I woke up alone. Richard had already left for work. No note, no message, no "good morning, wife." I stood in front of the massive bedroom window, looking out at a life that was supposed to feel like victory. Instead, it felt like exile. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, calm, unhurried. I turned, and everything shifted. He stood at the doorway, like he belonged there. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair slightly messy, like he didn't care enough to fix it. His eyes met mine, not scanning, not judging, just seeing. "Hi," he said softly. "You must be Lena." His voice was warm in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm Ethan." Richard's son, 27 years old. In that moment, my heart didn't race. It paused, like it was holding its breath. "Nice to meet you," I replied, suddenly aware of how small my voice sounded in this massive room. He smiled politely, then looked away. Respectful, controlled. "You probably feel lost in this place," he said. "Everyone does at first." First dinner as a family. Dinner that night was formal, too formal. Richard sat at the head of the table, speaking about markets, mergers, power. I nodded when expected, smiled when required. Ethan sat across from me, silent, observant. Every now and then our eyes met, and every time they did, I felt exposed, as if he could see the truth behind my polished appearance, that I didn't belong here, that I was pretending. At one point, Richard excused himself to take a call. The silence that followed felt heavy. Ethan broke it. "You don't have to impress anyone here," he said quietly. I laughed awkwardly. "That obvious?" He smiled. "Only to someone who's done the same thing." I wanted to ask what he meant, but Richard returned, and the moment disappeared. The loneliness of being a wife. Days passed, then weeks. Richard was always busy, always distant, always elsewhere. He provided everything except himself. No shared meals, no conversations, no warmth. I became a beautiful accessory in a beautiful cage. Ethan, on the other hand, was present. He asked if I was adjusting, if I needed help, if the house felt overwhelming. Things a husband should ask, things Richard never did. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself for caring. The first crack in my self-control. One evening I couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the soft hum of distant lights. I went to the kitchen for water. Ethan was there, barefoot, simple t-shirt, no walls. We startled each other. "Sorry," he said. "Couldn't sleep either." We stood there awkwardly, two adults, one forbidden space. Then he asked, "Are you okay?" No one had asked me that since the wedding. The question hit harder than it should have. "I think so," I lied. He nodded slowly, like he knew it was a lie. The night everything shifted, rewritten with love and kiss. The rain didn't fall softly. It poured, heavy, relentless, as if the sky itself had reached a breaking point. Richard was away on business, another city, another night of absence that felt permanent. When the power went out, the house plunged into darkness. Not frightening, just exposed. Candles were lit, one by one, their warm glow shrinking the massive living room into something intimate. The mansion no longer felt cold or distant. It felt human. Ethan and I sat on the couch, space between us that felt deliberate, almost desperate. We talked at first, small things, safe things, stories from childhood, music that reminded us of who we used to be. We laughed, too freely, too honestly. And then the laughter faded, not awkwardly, naturally. The kind of silence that doesn't demand words, but confessions. I felt him before I looked at him, the warmth of his presence, the way his body angled toward mine without touching, the way my chest tightened every time he inhaled. My heart was beating too fast. "I should go," I said quietly. The words felt weak. He nodded, slowly. But he didn't stand. Neither did I. The rain thundered against the windows, filling the silence with urgency. "I never wanted this," I whispered. "I never meant to feel this way." My voice trembled, not with fear, but with honesty. Ethan turned toward me, really turned. And when our eyes met, something in him broke open. "I tried to fight it," he said. "I told myself it was wrong, that it would pass." He swallowed. It didn't. My breath caught. The space between us felt unbearable now, charged, aching. "I see you," he continued softly. "I see how lonely you are, how strong you pretend to be." Tears burned my eyes. "No one has ever said that to me," I whispered. He reached out then, hesitated, then gently brushed his fingers against my hand. The touch was light, but it shattered me. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. "That's why this scares me," he said, "because it feels real." I turned my hand, my fingers curling around his. "That's what scares me too," I admitted. The silence swallowed us again. Not empty, heavy with everything we weren't supposed to say. I leaned closer without deciding to. He did the same. Our foreheads touched. Warm, familiar, dangerous. "This is wrong," I whispered. "I know," he breathed, but neither of us moved away. The kiss happened slowly, not rushed, not desperate, just a soft meeting of lips, hesitant at first, then full of emotion that had been waiting too long to be felt. It wasn't about desire, it was about recognition, comfort, love we hadn't meant to give. The moment we realized what we were doing, we pulled apart, breathing hard, eyes wide. Reality rushed back in. "Oh God," I whispered. Ethan stood up immediately, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have." "No," I interrupted. "So am I." The guilt hit instantly, sharp, unforgiving. But so did the truth. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. This was love. And it was powerful enough to destroy everything. Guilt that wouldn't let us go. The kiss ended, but it didn't disappear. It followed me. I felt it in the quiet of my room, long after Ethan had left the living room. I felt it in the echo of his breath, in the memory of how gentle it had been, not rushed, not careless, tender. That was the worst part. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I kept replaying it, the way he hesitated, the way his hand trembled slightly when he touched mine, the way the world seemed to fall silent when our lips met. It wasn't passion that terrified me. It was meaning. I pressed my hand against my mouth, as if I could erase the feeling still lingering there. "What have I done?" I whispered into the darkness. But the question didn't come with an answer, only longing. The next morning, I avoided him. I woke early, too early. I changed my routine completely. Breakfast in my room, walks at odd hours, anything to avoid crossing paths with him. But avoidance didn't bring relief. It made everything louder. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, my body tensed. Every time I didn't, I felt a strange ache. Guilt wrapped itself around me like a second skin. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, persistent, the kind that waits. I tried to pray. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped so tightly they hurt. I asked for forgiveness, for clarity, for strength. But all I could see was Ethan's face when he pulled away. Not regret, fear. Fear of how deeply he felt it too. When I finally saw him again, it was accidental. Or maybe fate had simply grown tired of our pretending. He was standing at the end of the hallway, dressed to leave, keys in his hand, jaw tight. We froze. The air between us thickened instantly. He didn't smile. Neither did I. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, before I could speak. The words landed heavy. "So am I replied. But my voice betrayed me. It wasn't just guilt in it. It was grief, for something that had barely begun and already felt lost. He took a step toward me, then stopped. "I haven't stopped thinking about it," he admitted. "About you." My breath caught. "Neither have I whispered. We stood there, close enough now that I could feel his warmth again. But this time, neither of us reached out. Because we both knew. If we did, we wouldn't stop. I turned away first, not because I was stronger, but because I was terrified of how weak I felt when I was near him. Behind me, I heard him exhale sharply, a sound that felt like loss. That day, guilt changed shape. It stopped being about right and wrong, and started being about choice. Because now I knew the truth. This wasn't a moment. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't something that would fade if we ignored it. This was love. Quiet, unwanted, and devastatingly real. Richard begins to see what we hid. Richard noticed before I was ready, not because he understood emotions, but because he understood change. The house had shifted. He felt it the moment he walked back in, his presence filling the rooms the way it always did, controlled and exact. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't comment on my smile. He watched. I felt his eyes on me during dinner, longer than usual. "You're quiet tonight," he said casually, cutting into his food. "I'm just tired," I replied. The lie came too quickly. He didn't respond right away. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully, as if tasting something unfamiliar. "You've been tired a lot lately," he said. I forced a soft laugh. "It's been an adjustment. The house, the schedule." He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. They sharpened. Ethan joined us later that evening. The air changed the second he entered the room. Not dramatically, subtly. Too subtly. Richard noticed. I noticed him noticing. Ethan kept his distance. Too much distance. He spoke less than usual, his answers clipped, careful. The restraint between us was visible now. Not intimacy, but tension. The kind that hums just beneath the surface. Richard set his glass down slowly. "You two seem different," he said. The word hung in the air. Different. My stomach tightened. "How so?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice even. "I don't know," Richard replied. Distant. Distracted. His gaze shifted to me. "Is everything all right between you and Ethan?" The question felt innocent. It wasn't. I smiled. "Yes, of course." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying us both the way a chess player studies the board. "You know," he said calmly, "I value loyalty." The word landed hard. Loyalty. I expect honesty in my home. Ethan's jaw tightened. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Of course," I said quietly. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Dangerous. Later that night, Richard found me alone in the sitting room. "You've been distant," he said. "I told you, I'm adjusting." He stepped closer. Not threatening. Assessing. "You don't look at me the same way," he continued. My chest ached. I didn't know how to explain that I never had. "I don't like surprises," he said softly, "and I don't like being made a fool." I met his eyes then. "I would never do that to you." The words were true, and false, at the same time. Richard searched my face, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he nodded. "Good," he said, "because betrayal changes everything." That night, alone in bed, I realized something terrifying. Richard didn't know, but he suspected, and suspicion is often more dangerous than truth, because it looks everywhere. Leo decision. The garden was quiet, almost impossibly quiet, under the weight of the evening. The storm from days before had passed, leaving the air thick with damp and the faint smell of wet earth. The sky had faded to a pale indigo, stars struggling to shine through the haze. I was standing by the stone fountain, hands gripping the edge as if holding myself together physically could stop my heart from breaking. Ethan approached. Slowly, deliberately. The space between us felt like miles, yet our eyes locked, pulling me into the gravity I'd tried to resist. I can't stay," he said. The words fell like stones into my chest. I froze. Leave? I asked, barely daring to breathe. Yes, he whispered. I can't stay here and pretend. Pretend none of this exists. Pretend I don't feel what I feel every time I look at you. My chest tightened. My fingers dug into the stone beneath me. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to take him in my arms and never let go. I love you, I wanted to say. But I didn't. Because love, when it's forbidden, doesn't always mean you get to say it. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration and pain twisting his features. I've tried, he continued. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to tell myself it's wrong, that it will pass. But it hasn't, and it won't. The weight of his confession crushed me, not because I didn't feel the same, but because the truth of it was dangerous, too dangerous. Leaving is the only way, he said, his voice breaking slightly. It's not fair to you, it's not fair to him, and it's not fair to me. I swallowed hard, tears threatening to fall. Ethan, please. I couldn't finish. There was no way to finish. No words could bridge the gap between what was right and what we wanted. He stepped closer, careful, hesitant, like he was trying to memorize every inch of me before stepping away forever. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I wanted to beg him to stay. I wanted to promise I could handle it. I wanted to tell him that I didn't care about consequences, that I loved him more than life itself. But I did none of those things. Because love sometimes demands sacrifice. Sometimes it asks you to let go of the one person who feels like home. He lingered for one final moment. The space between us was heavy with all the words we never spoke. And then he turned, walked away. The echo of his footsteps haunted the garden long after he had disappeared into the house. I sank to the stone bench, hands covering my face. Guilt, heartbreak, longing, all colliding into a single unbearable weight. I knew in that instant that nothing would ever be the same. Even if we survived the world outside, this love had already changed everything inside us. The secret that changed everything. Secrets have a way of escaping, no matter how tightly you hold them. It wasn't us who spoke first. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a confrontation. It was someone else. A whisper. A misinterpreted glance. A comment taken out of context. By the time Richard knew, the walls of the mansion seemed smaller, the shadows longer, the air heavier. He came home earlier than expected that evening. His footsteps echoed through the hallways like a judge approaching a courtroom. I was in the library. Ethan had just left the room. Richard stopped at the doorway, his presence instantly filling the space. He didn't shout. He didn't storm in. He simply stood there, looking at me with eyes that had always commanded rooms, and now scrutinized my very soul. I heard something today, he said, calm but sharp. And I need the truth. My stomach sank. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Richard walked closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I've noticed the distance, the tension, He paused, choosing his words with precision. Affection that isn't mine. My hands trembled slightly. Ethan's absence now felt like a ghost pressing against my chest. It's not what you think, I whispered, voice breaking. Richard didn't flinch. He never did. Is it? He asked. The silence stretched, long, terrible. He had seen enough. Not the kiss, not the stolen moments, but the way we looked at each other, the way the air changed when Ethan was near. The truth had a weight. It didn't need words to hurt. Richard finally exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. I trusted you, he said softly, each word sharp like glass. Everything I've built, I shared with you. And this betrayal. He shook his head. I don't need the details. I don't need the story. I don't need excuses. I wanted to speak. I wanted to explain. I wanted to say, nothing happened. But what are words against the truth of feelings? Richard's disappointment filled the room, a tangible thing. He didn't yell. He didn't slam doors. He simply left, his eyes lingering on me like a judgment I couldn't escape. And the house, our home, suddenly felt cold again, barren, silent. Ethan's absence loomed larger than ever. I felt his ghost in every corner, every shadow, every flicker of candlelight. Nothing had happened between us, but feelings were enough. Enough to shatter trust, enough to end a marriage, enough to break a family that was already fragile. And in that moment, I realized, love, when forbidden, is not only dangerous, it is destructive. The end of the marriage. The end didn't come with screaming. There were no slammed doors, no broken glasses, no accusations hurled across rooms. It came quietly, like everything Richard Hale did. A few days after the confrontation, he asked me to sit with him in his study. That room had always intimidated me. Dark wood, heavy shelves, a desk that felt more like a barrier than a place to work. He didn't offer me a seat. He simply gestured. I sat. He remained standing, hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk, eyes distant, already detached. I've spoken to my attorney, he said. No anger, no emotion, just fact. I think it's best we end this. The words landed slowly, like snow covering something already dead. I nodded, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to argue for something that had never truly existed. You'll be taken care of, he continued. The settlement will be fair. Fair. Such a strange word to use when hearts are involved. This isn't about money, he added, almost as if reading my thoughts. It's about respect. I looked up at him then, at the man I married for safety, at the man who never once asked if I was happy. I never meant to humiliate you, I said quietly. He studied me for a long moment. I should have known better, he replied. Men my age don't marry women like you without consequences. The words weren't cruel. They were worse. They were honest. I swallowed hard. I gave you everything, he continued, and I asked for very little in return. I wanted to say, you asked for silence. You asked for obedience. You asked for a wife, not a partner. But I didn't, because the truth wouldn't change anything now. The decision had already been made. The divorce moved quickly. Papers were signed, accounts separated, life reduced to documents and signatures. Richard handled it like a transaction, efficient, impersonal. The night before I moved out, I stood in the bedroom that had never felt like mine. The bed untouched, the air heavy. Richard didn't come in. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. Some marriages end long before the paperwork does, and ours had ended the moment love was never invited in. The final goodbye. Ethan was leaving at dawn. One bag, no noise. I met him by the door. We didn't pretend anymore. I tried to stay away, he said quietly. I know. That was all it took. No explanations, no apologies. Just two people standing too close to a love they couldn't keep. I'll carry this with me, he said. So will I. He didn't kiss me. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me, long enough to say everything. Then he left, and the house felt empty for the first time. The truth I live with, brief. Years later, people still ask if I regret it. I tell them this. I regret the pain. I regret the damage. I regret the timing. But I don't regret loving him. Because some loves aren't meant to last. They're meant to awaken you, and then walk away. People still argue about who was wrong. The young wife, the powerful husband, the son who loved what he shouldn't have. But the truth is simpler than blame. No one teaches you how to survive loneliness. No one warns you what happens when love finds you in the wrong place. And no amount of money can protect you from the one thing you can't control, your heart. I married for safety. I paid with silence. And I loved once, without permission. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with a lesson you carry forever. And the most dangerous lesson of all is this. Love doesn't ask who it belongs to. Thank you for watching. Your support means a lot. Subscribe for more powerful stories.